Okay, so in this video, we're going to take a look at the other 6 trig functions, or the other 4. We went over the sine and the cosine in terms of the unit circle, where here, if this was a point on the unit circle, we had x and y, and then some angle theta. And we defined the cosine of theta, all right, in terms of our right triangle is simply x, right, and then the sine of theta, right, if we think of it as our opposite over hypotenuse, was simply y. Now, in terms of our reciprocal functions, well, now we have the secant of t is 1 over x, but also can be defined as 1 over cosine of t. All right, since x is equal, not t, theta. All right, and the cosecant of theta, theta, is 1 over y, which we can define as 1 over the sine of theta. And the tangent of theta, which was the opposite over the adjacent. Now, its reciprocal function, the cotangent of theta, is x over y, or 1 over the tangent of theta. Okay? All right. So we can have, here are all 6 of our trig functions defined in terms of the unit circle and as reciprocals, so in terms of the cosine and the sine, right? So we have cosine, sine are circular functions, and we were able to define the other 4 in terms of the sine and cosine of theta. Now, we do have to be careful here wherever we have, so for cosine and sine, we're always dividing by 1, right? So secant, cosecant, tangent, and cotangent, we do have to be careful whenever we're dividing by 0, okay? So, because in certain cases, some of these values do become 0, right? So let's think of our kind of special angles here, 0, pi over 2, pi, and then 3 pi over 2. Right, so at 0 radians, this point is 1, 0. Right, so let's get a little table going here. We'll say radians. So theta, and we'll look at 0, pi over 2, pi, and 3 pi over 2. And again, once we get to 2 pi, then we're back to 0 radians, right? So they're cyclical here. All right, and let's take a look at the secant of theta. All right, so the points here along the quadrants is 1, 0, 0, 1. The point over here is negative 1, 0. And then down here, 0, negative 1. Okay, so when we have secant of theta, it's 1 over the cosine, so 1 over the x. That one is fine, right? That one's just 1. Right, if we're just looking at the secant of theta. Now, when we think of the cosecant of theta, right, that one involves the y, so it's 0. So when we have 0 in the denominator, it's undefined. Okay, and then kind of working my way here, what's going to happen, at least for 0 radians, is whenever I have a y in the denominator, So for our tangent theta of theta is y over x, so we get 0 over 1, and that's allowed, right? 0 divided by 1, we get back 0. Okay, but on the cotangent side, when I flip that around, right, then I have the y in the denominator, and 1 divided by 0, well, that one will be undefined. Okay, so now let's look at pi over 2. Okay, so now pi over 2, so here we have the y coordinate is 1 and the x coordinate is 0. So when we think of secant of theta, we'd have 1 over 0, which gives me an undefined quantity. All right, now for the cosecant, 1 over sine, well, sine of theta, in this case, would be 1. All right, and then moving on to the tangent, right, we have, think of it as y over x. So now we have 1 over 0, but again, division by 0 is not allowed, so it's undefined. All right, but then on the cotangent, we have 0 over 1 that is defined, and it is the value of 0. Okay, now moving along here, we'll see when we get to pi, the coordinates are negative 1, 0, so the x is negative 1. So for our secant, we'll get 1 over negative 1, which is negative 1. But when we go to the cosecant, right, 1 over y, but the y is now 0, again, not allowed, so we have undefined. All right, and then for our tangent of theta, we get y over x. All right, the y coordinate is 0, the x coordinate is negative 1. Legal operation here, that just gives us 0, right? And then for the cotangent of theta, I'm going to take the reciprocal of that. Now we have x over y, so negative 1 over 0. Now that one is not a valid operation, so we'll get undefined. Okay, and then here our last quadrantal angle we see when we have the secant of theta. All right, so here we have 1 over the x-coordinate, but the x-coordinate for 3 pi over 2 is 0, so we'll get undefined. All right, but for the cosecant, right, 1 over the sine, that gives us negative 1. All right, and then moving along the tangent, right, of 3 pi over 2, looking at the coordinates, y is negative 1, x is 0, so x is in the denominator, so here we have undefined. All right, and then lastly, for the cotangent, when x is in the numerator, we get 0 over negative 1. Again, that's fine. It just results in the value of 0. Okay. Okay, and then you see how each one of these functions, the secant of theta, cosecant, tangent theta, cotangent theta, right, they will have values that are undefined, right? And as you see, they're spaced. These occur at the quadrangle because that's where the coordinates will, one of the coordinates will be 0. So every pi over 2, right, the results are either, in terms of secant and cosecant, 1 or undefined, or negative 1. All right, and in terms of the tangent, all these quadrantal angles, they'll either be 0 or undefined, again, depending on which quadrant you're in.